think we do that. That's why it's already got
You're very sweet. Here you go. You are very welcome. Hello, everyone. We're about to get started. Please come have a seat, and if you can, sit up a little bit close to the front so we can get a good look at you. You look beautiful. We'll get started here as soon as Abe gives me the go-ahead, because I just work here.
Don't get paid.
I'm doing it for God. That's what I'm doing it for. It's a good cause.
Best
Yeah?
payment you did.
Amen. Yeah.
And also because.
And because, yeah. So let's go ahead, and I'd like to begin with a prayer. It's a prayer for unity. It was written by Jay McDaniel, professor of religion at Hendrix College in Arkansas. In this century, and in any century, our deepest hope, our most tender prayer, is that we learn to listen. May we listen to one another in openness and mercy. May we listen to plants and animals in wonder and respect. May we listen to our own hearts in love and forgiveness. May we listen to God in quietness and awe. And in this listening, which is boundless in its beauty, may we find the wisdom to cooperate with a healing spirit, a divine spirit, who beckons us into peace and community and creativity. We do not ask for a perfect world, but we do ask for a better world. We ask for deep listening. And in this your name, dear Lord, we ask, amen. Amen. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody here. Thank you so much for coming. We're here to have a conversation, a very important conversation that's very much needed. It has been somewhat quiet for a bit in the state of Utah. Our last execution was back in 2010. And it seems that, again, things have been a little bit quiet since then. But with Taberon Honor being executed on the 8th, just this week, we thought we need to reignite this conversation and see what others feel and think about all of this. And if there's something that we can do to save his life, or if there's things that we can do to get the conversation started again. But that's what we need to do. That's what we need to do today. So I'd like to thank, there's a couple of individuals here. We have a couple of our clergy here. I have Deacon Jeff Allen, who has arrived from St. Vincent's. I'd like to welcome him.
Yep.
And I'd also like to welcome Deacon Mike Gilson, who is right there. Actually, Deacon Mike ministers with me at the prison on Saturdays, and he's at St. Andrews. So with that, I'd like to introduce Abe Bonowitz to kind of get us started. Abe is with the Death Penalty Action Group. It is a nonprofit that has been around for quite some time, and he helps states to organize and helps to educate. And I will tell you, I'm incredibly grateful because I had passion, but no knowledge, or I didn't know how to do this at all. So I just thank God for Abe. Abe, please.
Well, you have incredible passion, but you also do know what you're doing. What you have created, look at this room full of people. That is your creation. And we're grateful for you and the other people that are part of the committee. Thank you. I'll let you go sit down. We're grateful for you, Michelle, Beasley, and for everybody that's become part of a committee that we called together just in the last week or two. We started asking, is anybody doing anything in Utah about this execution? We all hoped that this wasn't going to happen. And we all prayed that this wasn't going to happen. But you know what you have to do is you have to hope for the best, pray for the best, but prepare for the worst. And the situation that we're in right now is the worst. So before I get into that, I just want to again say thank you to everybody that's part of the committee that has come together to have us be welcomed at churches in the community and by especially the Catholic Diocese of Salt Lake. Bishop Solis has been unlike any other bishop or Catholic conference that I have worked with anywhere in the country. Has basically said, what's mine is yours. Not to me, but to his people who came to him and said, we want to do this. So, you know, it's not a new thing, but I think a recreation, because 14 years ago here in Utah, we did have an execution. We're going to hear about that in a few minutes. That was the execution of Brian Lee Gardner. And at that time, I was the executive director, or not the executive director, but the director of affiliated support of the National Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, which sadly does not exist anymore. But we're now the national organization that works to lift up this issue and give people the tools to be visible and vocal in their opposition to executions. We are not lawyers, and we are grateful for the legal team and the people that do the work in the courts to try to stop these executions. And the challenge that we have in this country, as in this state, is that the courts are at a space where really nothing is stopping executions. Taberon Honor's legal status, as far as I understand it, is that he's got nothing left to argue or to try to appeal with in his case. Any subsequent appeals that we may or may not see this week will have to do with the process of execution, how we're killing our prisoners, where do we get the drugs, who's going to start the ID, are they capable, is the prison's execution protocol up to snuff? You know, those questions will have already been asked in some ways, may be asked again in other ways, and then they're going to go ahead and kill him. That's the expectation that we should have. And that's why in this space, the obligation that we have, those of us who oppose the death penalty, is to stand up and say, no, not in my name, not in our names. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the organizing and who the our is, because it's a vast number of people who live in Utah, of Utahns that oppose the death penalty. You can't see them, you can't hear them because they're all over the place, but you all represent, most of you, there may be people who are in favor of the death penalty. Our job is to lift up this voice and this message. I want you to know that if you had asked me 35 years ago, would you be doing this sort of thing? I would have said, you're crazy. Because the first time I encountered this issue as an adult, and also as a kid, but as an adult in particular, I'd gone to a meeting on the campus of Ohio State University, and I was surprised when the speaker was talking about the death penalty. And I argued with her. I said an eye for an eye. I said, this is the United States. We have the best justice system in the world, and if that includes the death penalty, then fine with me. I'll pull the switch myself. That's how I believed. That's what I thought. And it wasn't based on anything other than the gut reaction that we all have when we hear of a horrific murder that has happened. So I set out to try to prove those anti-death penalty people wrong. And that's why we want to have this conversation too, so people can get their questions asked and answered to the extent that it's possible. Some people will never be satisfied with what we have to say about why we oppose the death penalty. There is a gut reaction of people who commit awful crimes deserve whatever they get coming. The question that we ask is, do we deserve the power to kill? Can we, and really by extension, our government, both here in Utah as well as nationally, as well as all the 27 states that retain this in law, plus the federal and the military death penalties, can we be trusted with the power to kill? Can we always get it right? Do we live up to the bedrock foundation of our legal system, which are the 4 words carved into the face of the US Supreme Court building? Does anybody know what those 4 words are? Who said that? Big prize to you, sir, because normally it's very few people that understand, and most people didn't know the answer to that, right? I was shocked. Equal justice under law. Those are the 4 words carved into the face of the US Supreme Court building. And if you have ever had any dealings with our legal system, criminal or civil, what you know is that we don't have equal justice under law. What matters more than the severity of the crime is money, how much money a defendant has, how much money a county has to pursue a death penalty prosecution, how much money you can afford, you have to be able to afford the best possible legal representation. Money, race. What matters more is if you kill a white person in many cases. Interestingly, in the case of Taberon Honor, we've got both the victim and the perpetrator who are Native American. So that's a little bit different in this case. Money, race, politics. The question of whether the elected district attorney, is the district attorney here elected? Yes. And the elected attorney general, and whether they're willing to pursue a death penalty. And are there elections coming up, and does that motivate whether they're going to pursue an election, an execution? And we could be asking that question right now about what's happening in Utah, what's next, who's running for re-election, why are we doing this now? Money, race, politics, and geography, the geography of county lines. And I know this doesn't always play out, especially out here in western states, where it's a little bit different than in states that have huge numbers of counties and many of them are populous. But where I live in Ohio, and this is the thing that changed my mind on the death penalty, made me jump from one side of the fence to the other, is learning that you have to kill in a county that can afford a death penalty trial. If you kill in a rural county that doesn't have a large tax base, they can't afford the trial. And that's important because it's the decision to make, to roll the dice and decide to even seek a death sentence that is made by a politician and depends on the budget that they have in most cases. So money, race, politics, and geography all matter more than the severity of the crime. And there's much more that we can talk about this and say about the death penalty. And what we want to do is share with you some perspectives from people who I like to call voices of experience on the death penalty, people who have lived this. And then we want to open up to dialogue to hear your thoughts and questions and make sure that you leave here getting answers to your questions. And for those who are ready and want to do something about it, we're going to give you the tools and talk about what's next. I mentioned a few minutes ago that the last execution here in Idaho was run in Gardner in 2010. And today with us, our first speaker is Randy Gardner, who's become a good friend since the time when he called me shortly after that execution and said, you know, my brother was executed, what can I do? And it's been a pleasure to be able to work with Randy all over the country when we do these kinds of presentations about, to hear his voice of experience. So please welcome Randy Gardner.
Great. Thanks everyone for coming out. I'm not a public speaker like some of our speakers are. I never in the world thought I'd be doing something like this, but on June 18, 2018, they executed my brother by firing squad. I was lost. It was crazy. I never thought he was on death row for 25 years. And I had no one to turn to. That's how hence I got online and found aid and got hooked up with the Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing, and I immediately went to Texas. Texas, the biggest state here that kills people, executes people. I went out there and I was with four people that were exonerated. I never thought no one was even. I thought everybody on death row was guilty. I knew my brother was. I was scared to be with these people. It's like, no way, you're not really exonerated. Yeah, we were on death row 20 years, 15 years, 25 years, you know. Anyway, a lot of what I like to talk about, I don't morally believe in taking another person's life. I never have. The collateral damage that it's caused me and my family was, I mean, even to this day, I have nightmares of me executing my mother in a wheelchair. Her why Randy, why is I'm pulling trigger and her heart blows out. It's like, for me executing my kids or my kids executing me, that's the kind of stuff a lot of people that deal with. We deal with this when our government is responsible. I mean, it's premeditated murder. These people on death row, they know the time and the place that they're going to be executed. Who knows that in this world, you know? Life without parole is a good alternative. I actually think most people that kill people deserve a second chance. I think they're not always the same people. When they go into the system, then they go out. No, and that's where we're spending a lot of this money that we're spending, $200,000 to execute just for the drug here in Utah. And that's a lot of taxpayers' money to go out to different organizations and rehabilitation and help people that really need it. You know, there's a lot of mental illness going on. It's running rampant now since COVID, but most people that are on death row, the 3,600 people on death row right now, some of them have mental illness. Their upbringing was terrible. You don't see no rich people on death row. Not a one. And that's the truth. I know during my brother's trial, there was a gentleman, I say gentleman, Mark Hoffman, if you're familiar in Utah, during his trial, he killed two people. He was selling documents to the LDS church. So it was a forger, fake documents, basically. But because he had money and he was associated with the LDS church, this happened right during my brother's trial. He's now serving life in prison, so it's really not the worst of the worst that this is supposed to happen to. You know, it's same as Abe said, you know, maybe not as much in Utah, what county, but Texas is really, Texas, if a county has money, they're going to seek the death penalty. Utah, we don't have very much. I think we have a lot of fight in Utah. I've been up to the legislature and testified during their hearing a few years ago, 2019. I honestly thought we were going to pass an anti-death penalty here in Utah. They tabled it at the last minute, which really upset me because we had support. So I rushed out of the state capitol, had pictures blowing up my brother's autopsy photos. I went back up there the last 2 hours of the legislative session and went rogue on them. Had a group of kids there, my kids and some friends, and we started showing them these pictures of my brother's body and what it does to somebody. But that's the kind of dreams I have, that's collateral damage that it does to people. And most people that had this happen to them, they lay low, they can't do it. I, on the other hand, I don't like doing this, but I felt if I don't do something, I feel worse. I have been diagnosed because of a severe post-traumatic stress disorder. After the first 8 years, I had to seek professional help. You know, I'm a pretty strong, low person, but I can fix this, it'll go away, it'll go away. It didn't go away, but so I did seek counseling through a professional service. You know, the dreams are less, I don't have it as much. You know, I'm healing. Time heals all wounds. It'll never heal all these wounds that I feel in my heart, but you know what, I'm fighting it's the right thing to do. And you know, I'm not going to stop until the death penalty is abolished. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Charles Keith. And got to meet Charles, I don't even know how long ago, but we've been connecting off and on for quite a while. And then when I had an opportunity suddenly, because enough people were supporting our organization that we could begin to pick people, I hired Charles to become our impacted communities liaison. So whenever anybody calls or emails and says, you know, my loved one's in prison, what do I do? Or I oppose death penalties, but I've had a family member murdered, who can I talk to? In addition to referring murder victim family members to the group that we're going to hear from next, Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing, I also make sure they get a chance to talk to Charles, because sadly, he has the stories that none of us want, but he also has over 30 years of experience in dealing with it and can help people understand how to get through this process, or at least survive it. Charles,
Thanks, Abe. It's going to be a tough one. I'm going to try to bring 32 years pain to you. As Abe said, my name is Charles Key. I'm the Impacted Communities Liaison for Death Penalty Action. I didn't know what that meant, Impacted Communities Liaison. All I knew that I was going crazy. But first, I'm going to tell you what happened to my brother. They said that a masked man walked up to our house, was looking for another person. That person wasn't there, so the masked man went into the house and he shot everybody in it because they thought that he was hiding them. As time went on, within a matter of 24 hours, the description was given of a large black man. In a town of 4,000, 5,000 people, there was only like 3 large black men, and my brother had just moved back down to stay with my aunt. So they uncovered the mask, they just said it with my brother, and the rest, you know, it's 32 years later. I didn't know a lot about the law, but, you know, I had to drop out of college. I was actually a psychology major back in '94. I had to drop out of college and never had a chance to go back. So all the big dollars, all the big dreams, all the college hoopla was gone for me. I would be spending the rest of my life fighting the death penalty. Learning the law was tough. I gathered every law book I could find. I went to every Goodwill, every bookstore, anything that I could find on the law. Because in order for me to talk to lawyers or understand what was going on with my brother, I first had to understand the law. And that's what the judges tell you. Ignorance is no excuse for the law. And I didn't understand that phrase either, but now I do. Because your lawyer, I mean, he's in court. He's not going to be your counselor. He's not going to explain to you what things are going on. He's there for that defendant. He's not there for the family. And our family, in my brother's case, we got left behind. We did not have the money. We did not have the knowledge. We didn't have anything. We were victims. As we sit and watch my brother become a victim, we also became victims because we knew that he was innocent. But we couldn't find out, what do you guys have to say that he's guilty? And I've told him time and time again, if you can show me just one thing that you have on my brother, I will leave this alone. To this day, 32 years later, they have not shown me one thing. I've taken every police document that I found. You know, I took a job at a halfway house and taught me how to research papers and started making me understand what an impact was. So I found these statements. I found all these police documents that had not been entered into his trial. I mean, if you get the opportunity, I did a podcast with Kim Kardashian. It's called The System, the case of Kevin Keith. If you get a chance to take a good listen to that, it'll tell you some of the things that I found and some of the things that I've done. And, you know, putting that together, it was more so to help other people because, you know, we're so far down the road. It's actually, we have a pardon sitting on the governor's desk now. But my question and my mother's question was, if this man's innocent, how come he's not home? He was taken off death row in 2010. Governor Strickland had executed 28 men in a matter of 4 years. And it took something very powerful. It was something that governor saw that nobody else even wanted to look at. That's one thing about the death penalty. Nobody wants to look at it. They turn their back. And then everything else happens. And when you turn around, it's over. So, you know, I had to get the energy. I had to say, man, I've never done anything like this. I've been fighting the death penalty. How do I fight the death penalty? That took me finding and seeking my Savior. I had no idea. I says, Lord, what do I do? I mean, I'm in my bedroom, literally going crazy. This had become my college class. And I'm in there crying. And he says, why are you crying? And I'm telling him about my brother. Now, believe me, these are real things. And he says, you never cried for me. And I hadn't. I'd never thought about it. And then I says, oh my God. He says, go look at my trial if you think your brother's is rough. And I went and I studied that trial of Jesus. I mean, it was unbelievable, unbelievable. And I found myself being drawn near to that cross. I could hear the people crying and wailing because there was nothing they could do. They abandoned Jesus. They stepped back. The other one betrayed him, and the other one denied him. And I says, wait a minute, is this stuff still going on like this? Where's that love for Jesus? So I told him, I'm going to display that love. I'm going to go out and tell everybody about you. And I stopped telling them the story about my brother. I completely stopped. I started telling them what happened to Jesus. The next thing you know, my brother's on death row. Wow. I didn't know how to do it. So I don't know. It was a blessing, but they took him off in 2010 based on an innocent claim. And then they turned around and gave him life without parole, just in case he did it. I was like, wow. So I fought the death penalty for 16 years. I've been fighting life without parole for 16 years. And I've given them every piece of evidence that you can even imagine. They didn't even know I had, which they had absolutely none. And our family, we just can't understand. We became a death penalty family. We started raising up our children and our grandchildren off the death penalty. And it has totally tore up our family. It did not educate them. It made them very angry because if a person is innocent and you can prove that the person is innocent, why isn't that person home? And again, trying to explain this to children and teens, and we're talking about adults here, church-going adults, people that are very religious. How can you do such a thing to hold innocent people in prison, knowing that they're innocent, or to execute another person, knowing if that was your relative, you would not execute that person? I don't understand these things that you would impose a sentence on someone that you would not like to have imposed upon you or your loved ones. As we've gone and seen so many executions, the vigils, I didn't know what a vigil is. How many of you know what that is? That's that funeral before they execute this guy. I've been about 70, 75 vigils. Not for my brother. I've heard from so many other people. I was a little reluctant to even talk because these people were being executed. And I couldn't say, well, to that person, but I'm glad my brother wasn't executed. And it became very difficult for me because I wasn't running into too many people whose loved ones was getting off death row. And that kind of bothered me, and it showed me how cruel Americans can be to Americans, to the children. How do you explain that? And then we're always trying to teach our children about honesty and good deeds and all this good stuff, but yet we still have the death penalty. And that's something, if you're wrong, you cannot bring that person back. You cannot. So how can you impose such a sentence? Again, I'm out here lost. I had not one single person help me with this case, not one. Nobody knew how to fight it. And I tried to run, but I couldn't. Again, it took me to Jesus. And I told him, I got the faith, Lord. I got the faith. But how do, they say faith without works is dead. Remember when Peter got out the boat and he was trying to test his faith, that walking on the water? I was willing to walk on the water. It didn't matter to me where it was. A puddle of water, a lake, an ocean. I would have stepped out that boat to prove my faith. But he explained it to me. He says, no, that's not what I'm talking about. He was talking about my tears. He was talking about the salty tears that we have come down. We've all tasted them. That's what he was talking about, that faith piece. And he told me, if you believe in me, we'll do something with those tears. And I was like, what is he talking about? And then again, the revelation came out and it says, if you can continue to walk on these tears, I will turn those tears into tears of joy. And that's where my faith comes. And he turned my tears into joy because I started understanding so many things that I didn't understand. I've read so many different Bibles. I was religiously looking for what religion could I turn to that would help me the most with my brother. And I found out it was all of them. It was all of them. The Quakers, the Mormons, the Catholics, the street people. Who didn't I want? Who do you think Jesus would not save? I know there's a lot of us that we wouldn't save somebody, but who would Jesus reject? If he's our Savior, who would he reject? Who would God not love? If I recollect, there was a murderer that was taken into heaven with Jesus. See? That forgiveness, all those things, all our answers are in our Bibles. We just don't let our hearts and our mind come together to show love for others because it's not us. As Abe said, he was on the other side of the fence. I never really thought about it, never really thought about it and now it's dominated my life. And it's had me reach out to people that I never thought I would reach in my entire life. Kim Kardashian, people ask me, how did you reach her? And it wasn't easy. There's another gentleman by the name of Jason Flom. He approached the governor in my brother's name, and I didn't find that out for almost 10 years later. So much other additional information came out, as to some of the people that stepped up to try to help my brother. Here's in this man, no evidence whatsoever. How do you execute this stuff? And then you can walk around out there, and you can have the same T-shirt on that somebody that committed a crime, a murder. They're going to grab you. You can have the same ball cap on that guy has, because that's the only description. He had on a Denver Broncos ball cap. You're in trouble. Or he had on anything else. You're in trouble. So now here you are saying, I didn't do it. That's what the rest of them are saying. So now you're in prison, telling everybody I didn't do it. So here I am, 32 years later. I'm 66 years old. It has taken my life, but I've given my life to my brother. And I told him, if we put our hearts together, our spirits together, we can become one. And that's what we did. I did not abandon my brother, nor did I deny him, nor did I betray him. And I told my mother, I love her, and I'm going to save your son, my brother. So, it makes you sound like you're a hero, but you're not, because he hasn't come home yet. I get asked every day, let's come home, let's come home. When I go home from coming from Utah, my mom's going to ask me, what are those people down there doing about the death penalty? Every time I've been all over the United States, and every time I go home, she asks me, what are they going to do? What are they doing? So here's your chance to do something. Here's your chance to talk to all those other mothers that I have met throughout the United States. Here's your chance to come together. Here's your chance to speak up and show Jesus that you would not abandon him, betrayed him, nor deny him. Thank you. Man, it's rough telling everybody your pains and tragedies in your family. But I had a brother that was murdered during all of this. It had nothing to do with the crime. It was just somebody that was trying to rob somebody, went to the wrong house. He surprised me. He got shot 3 times in the back. And we're already dealing with the death penalty. So, my family, they were screaming, we want the death penalty. Who's ever been caught? We want the death penalty, because it seemed like this was their chance to get back at some people. And I had to sit them down, and we talked and talked. The crime is still unsolved, but I'm saying what mindset that my family, they had turned into killers, spiritual killers. They wanted, whoever they catch, we want him dead. And I talked to them, and my mom was the most difficult, and she does not miss church. But she was the most difficult one to convince of the death penalty, because she kept saying, they won't let my son go. And we had to talk about that revenge and all that crazy stuff and all that crazy talking, until she gave me a hug. And she says, you know what? You gave me my spirit back. I gave her back to herself, because she had turned mean and evil, as any mother would. Can you imagine how Mary felt looking up there at Jesus? But it does not tell us in the Bible how she felt, what she did, or what happened. Can you imagine? And that's what the death penalty is all about, your imagination. Imagine that was you. Thank you.
Just to be clear, we are well aware that there are no questions about the guilt of Taberon Honor and the execution that we're looking at here in Utah on Wednesday. We deal with this every week, every month. Wednesday is going to be an interesting question, an interesting day for us in particular, because in the morning, 9 a.m. Central Time, they're going to start a clemency hearing for Emmanuel Littlejohn, who is scheduled to be the next person executed in Oklahoma. Emmanuel Littlejohn didn't kill anybody. He was part of a crime, but the witnesses all say that the taller man did the shooting, and the taller man got a life sentence. And Emmanuel Littlejohn, who didn't kill anybody, got a death sentence. And on Wednesday morning, there's going to be a clemency hearing to decide whether he's worthy of mercy, like we had here in Utah a couple weeks ago with Taberon Honor. Then we're going to have a press conference at 11 a.m. which you're all invited to, at the State House. We'll figure out exactly where that's gonna be, tomorrow, and we'll announce that. And we're gonna also at 11 a.m. here, hopefully, as many communities of faith that have bells, tolling their bells in our For Whom the Bell is Tolled campaign. See, that's the webpage at the bottom of this black sign here, calling attention to the fact of the execution. Whether you support it or not, you have to know it's happening. And that's really one of the biggest travesties of the circus that we're going into this week. And it is a circus, a media circus, and a government circus. The travesties of the circus that we're going into this week is that most people aren't going to have a clue that it's even happening in their names. A few hours after that, 6 o'clock Central Time in Texas, they're going to execute Arthur Burton, a man who's guilty of what he did. And there's no campaign for him. His lawyers didn't want anybody doing anything, and he didn't want anybody doing anything, so there's no campaign, and very few people even are aware that he's scheduled for execution. And then 5 hours, 6 or 7 hours after that, we're going to have an execution here in Utah. And there's one more execution scheduled in August, and then 4 in September, including a man named Marcellus Williams in Missouri, where his lawyers had to just fight and win a hearing to allow him to have an evidentiary hearing, because there's DNA evidence that shows he didn't do the crime. The Innocence Project's all over that case. And yet, the Attorney General of Missouri says he's not worthy of having that evidence heard. That's happening. In addition to Emmanuel Littlejohn's possible execution, in addition to at least one execution in Texas, and there's another one that I'm blanking on right now that's also scheduled in September, and on and on and on. In October, they're planning to execute a guy named Robbie Robertson in Texas, a man who was convicted using the shaken baby syndrome. The idea that we see this over and over again, by the way, that dead children, they figure they must have done something. And Robbie Robertson is one where even the prosecutors and people that help convict him are speaking out and say we shouldn't be killing this person. And yet it's quite likely that despite the evidence that no crime occurred, they may execute him. We're going to see what happens. But and we're talking about all of this because for you all in Utah, this is the first execution. We're all focused on Taberon Honor and what he did and all. But the stories that we have are really apply across the board over and over and over again. It's the system that we want to make sure you come away understanding. One of the things that happens as we do this work, especially when we talk about this, and this just happened to me on my Facebook page just yesterday, somebody, again, you'd feel different if it happened to you or someone that you love. And when I get that challenge, I affirm it. You're right, I don't know what it is to lose a loved one to murder. Nobody wants to have that story to tell, and I'm hopeful that nobody here has that story to tell, except the people that we're hearing from now. Nobody wants to be a part of these clubs. So I invite you to do what I do, which is to listen carefully to this next story, especially so that when you find yourself challenged, somebody says, you'd feel different if it happened to you or someone that you love, you can do what I do, which is turn around and say, well, you're right, I don't know exactly what that is, but let me tell you about my friend, SueZann Bosler, and then I can share her story. So listen carefully. Welcome your friend and mine, SueZann Bosler.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, we're all awake. Good. Goodness, these are my brothers right here that I've heard their story so many times, but no matter how many times I hear their story, it's still, I have to breathe to be able to do mine. Like you said, I'm SueZann Bosler. I'm a victim survivor. I'm a co-founder of Journey of Hope from Violence to Healing, and it is just exactly what it sounds like. We share stories of each one of us of what we went through, a traumatic thing in our family, for a family member to get killed. And we share about how we came from anger to forgiveness also, to show that it can work. It happened almost 38 years ago, December 22nd, 1986. It was a day that changed my life. My father was a Reverend Bill Bosler, and we were at a church called Church of the Brethren. I don't know if anybody's heard of Church of the Brethren. It's kind of a sisterhood church of Amish Mennonites. We're known as the Peace Church, they're originally from Germany. We lived in a parsonage next to our church in a bad area near Miami. And my dad was not afraid of being there because he wanted to help people. That's what he was there for. Every day, every week, we had somebody coming to our door for food, clothing, help, counseling, you name it. We were there for them to help them as much as we could. That's what we were there for. My sister just had a baby October 4th, right before that. And my dad and I were planning on going up to meet the rest of my family so he could meet his first and only granddaughter. This was an interesting day because my father and I had gone Christmas shopping, so we would have presents to take up to our family. We came home, I went to get dressed again to go out. My dad was reading in the living room and we heard the doorbell ring. And when we heard the doorbell ring, like I said, it was somebody regular that came to us for help. Or was somebody new with a new challenge for us. When I heard my dad open the door, I listened for the voice if I recognized it. And as soon as I heard my dad open the door, he made strange noises. And I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't sound right. So a few seconds later, I walked down to the hallway and I'm looking at the kitchen doorway. My dad's hanging onto the kitchen doorway and a man is stabbing him with a knife. Not once, not twice, over and over and over and over and over and over again. He collapsed on his hands and knees and I kept coming towards him and I involuntarily screamed. So the man heard me. By the time I got there, he turned around and was going to stab me in the front. I turned quickly, he stabbed me 3 times in the back and I went down. My dad tried to get up, he turned around and did this all over to my dad again and again and again and again and again and again and again to my dad, and he collapsed on the floor. I tried to get up. By the time I got up, the man put his hand on my shoulder. I'm backing into the living room, I'm looking into his eyes. He has the knife by his head right here. Out of the corner of this eye, I see my dad crawling to the front door on the other side of the couch. I'm watching the knife come to my face, so I turned my face and it embedded into my head twice here. And I went down on the floor. It was one of those human instincts that I held my breath to pretend I was dead because I could hear him above me. All that work that he had just done, he was out of breath. He was watching to see if he needed to stab me more times so that he wouldn't have a witness. I somehow must have convinced him that I was dead. I heard him go straight to my bedroom. I heard my door open and I let out my breath. And we had a bamboo sofa, so my dad had collapsed by the front door and I could see underneath the sofa to my dad. And he was breathing hard. And it seemed like every breath that he took was a little bit harder to take. And I'm going to myself, God, please tell me this is a nightmare. Please tell me that I'm dreaming this. But when I'm watching my dad try to breathe, and I feel this warm river of blood coming across my face, it was real. The man went from room to room, and I'm saying, when is he going to be gone? Please leave early, because I want to save my dad's life. He just took his time here, he took his time there. One time he came and he pushed a chair on top of me. He was angry, because obviously we were not the rich people, and he couldn't find a lot of money there. He had come on drugs, he needed money for drugs, and he was searching for money to get more drugs. Finally, when he was in my parents' room taking a lot of time, I was like, please hurry, because my dad, one time, I didn't know if he took a breath, so I was like, I ignored my father after that, so I could stay alive to help him. And I just kept saying, God, keep me alive so I can call for 911, I can call for 911. The man left, I went straight to the phone, the first one made me sound like a prank phone caller, so I had to hang up again, because I needed to hear the words, help is on the way. Those are the 5 words that I needed to hear, because my plan was, if they knew they were on their way, I could go bring him back to my dad, and I could hold him in my arms. And if he was gonna die, he was gonna die in my arms, not on that cold floor full of blood. He was gonna die in my arms, so I could tell him I love him at last. As we know, as human beings, things don't always go our way. I wasn't prepared for this. I lost so much blood that I had to sit down, and the first cop came. I saw him through the jealousy windows. I went up and unlocked the door and sat back down, and I'm just rocking, holding my head, hoping that somebody came. When he came in, I saw him pull out a gun, and we didn't know if the guy was still there, and that's when I first passed out. I remember waking up in the ambulance as they cut off my clothes, asking, is my dad alive? Helicopter, is my dad alive? Emergency room, is my dad alive? That's all I wanted to know. That's all I cared about. Because when I talked to God, God and I had a short conversation. God, if I'm dying, I know I'm coming to heaven, but please save my dad, because obviously this place still needs my father. Instead, I was going up to our family. My dad's nearest person, only granddaughter. They had to come down to see if we were alive. They had to take out this whole side of the shattered skull and 2 pieces of my brain. So they had damaged my memory and my speech. And I remember when I heard my mom's voice whispering in my ear, we're here, we're here. And the first thing I said to her was, Merry Christmas. But after that, what did I do? I only asked that one question that I wanted to know the answer to. Yeah. Is my dad alive? That next week I was asking that question, a week to the day later. Everybody knows what a PK is. Preacher's kid, right? Me as a preacher's kid, I saw a doctor, 2 nurses, my mom, my sisters, and at the end I see a minister. I knew something wasn't right. And when my mom told me that he wasn't alive anymore, I really lost it. I didn't do very well, because I was hoping that I saved his life. I felt so guilty. I felt so horrified that I didn't save him, that I didn't want to live myself. I didn't want to live, I didn't care if I died. So they had to hold me down and sedate me, so I wouldn't pull out all the tubes that were in me. They had to take me to a solitary room, and after that I couldn't say that question again. I had to think about, who the hell am I? What do I do now? And where do I go from here? What did I learn from my dad? What did I learn from God? And where do I take action upon it? I had to work the next 10.5 years. This is the second surgery. I had to work the next 10.5 years for the man who was caught, James Bernard Campbell, to get life, not death. 8 years before this occurred, my father and I had a death penalty conversation. I was testing him on if he's for or against the death penalty and why. He answered every question clearly. Finally, he said, SueZann, if anyone were ever to murder or kill me, I would still not want that person to get the death penalty. I will never forget that. Because the first 5.5 years, who did I try to save? James Bernard Campbell's life. I did it for my dad first. because I sure the heck did not forgive James Burrow Campbell yet. I went around the world with our organizations that we were invited to share stories about forgiveness. And I must have said, I forgive him 1,000 times. But I would come home and I would be still angry. I started planning on getting him into a padded room like this, and I wanted to punch him out. I wanted to punch his teeth out. I wanted to hurt him. I'm thinking, SueZann, here you are, a PK, you've been in the church all your life, your dad taught you about death penalty, about forgiveness, you learned it all this time, you should be able to do it. But it didn't work like that for me right now. I said to myself, if I forgive him, does that mean that I won't be allowed to cry and miss him? Will that be taken away from me? If I forgive him, am I saying it's okay for what he did? If I help the government kill him, since James Burrow Campbell has the title murderer, if I help the government, my title would be murderer too. And I refuse to be a part of that. I have so much to work on already. I don't need one more thing on my plate. The prosecutors, I thought, were going to honor and respect my opinion about the death penalty. I assumed that the justice system was going to back me up, but it didn't. Yes, James Burrow Campbell got guilty, which was exactly what I wanted. But then it went into the phase of death penalty or life. And I told the prosecutor again, we are against the death penalty. He says, okay, whatever, SueZann, and then he got the death penalty again. I'm going, something is not right here. Here I am a witness and I don't want the death penalty. Where's the respect coming in here from the justice system? It's not happening. So I had to hire my own lawyer to protect my victim's rights of what I could do in that courtroom to save his life. And she taught me a couple of things that I needed to use when I was up on that witness stand for the last time. One of the things was, she says, when prosecutors ask you questions, they want to get in your face, they want to draw that answer out, they want the jurors to hear what they want them to hear. They want the judge to hear. So you can't look at him, you have to look at everywhere else but him, because he's not in charge anymore. They also told me before I got up on the stand that I was not allowed to say my opinion about the death penalty. And that freaked me out too, because I thought, I thought this was America. I thought this was America. We're allowed our opinion, right? Assuming. But I go, okay, I wasn't prepared for that. But when they brought the jurors in, the prosecutor asked me your name, your address, and SueZann, what's your occupation? I'm not looking at him. SueZann Bosler, my address. I'm a hairdresser, which I know you can't tell today, but I really am. Okay, I'm a hairdresser, but I work to abolish the death penalty. Although they didn't clap in there. It was quiet in the mouse, and then you'll see on 48 hours that the prosecutor goes, okay. Ask another couple questions, pretended with the jurors that it was okay. Sent the jurors out, had the sidebars with the lawyers, and the judge turns to me, which I wasn't expecting, and said, SueZann, if you ever say your opinion about the death penalty again, we will put you in jail for 6 months and fine you. Which was another thing added on that I wasn't expecting. And I'm thinking, wow, are you kidding me? Am I in America again? You know? So after that, though, it didn't hold me back. It did not hold me back at all. I said, if I have to go to jail, then I'll have to go to jail. The rest of the time, I did not cooperate with him. You'll see it on 48 hours. Then he asked me a question. I said, you already asked me that question. The answer is still the blah. And he asked me again, that's the third time you asked me the question, and the still answer is this. So he was getting frustrated. And the lawyer, my lawyer that I hired also said, you're not supposed to have emotion, wasn't easy either. But you know what? They weren't in charge anymore after I said my occupation. I was in charge, My dad was in charge. God was in charge at that moment. And after June 13, 1997, I call it the day of victory. It was day of victory of saving James Bernard Campbell's life. Yeah. I'm going to go backwards a little bit, saying 5.5 years into it, I mentioned before that, first of all, I did it for my father because that's what he wanted. I was up on the stand before the jurors came in. It was about the first or second death penalty trial. And I looked at James Bernard Campbell and I said, James, I forgive you. Whether you accept it or not, I forgive you. And it was the first moment of those 10.5 years, I didn't just say the words from my mouth, from my lips. I said the words from my heart and my soul. I didn't say it 99.9%. I said, I call it 100% pure forgiveness. And it was after that, I wasn't sitting on the stand like this. I was like this. I was this. Also, I will tell you, before I 100% forgave him, I was here. He was down here. But after I 100% forgave him, I was here. I was not better than him. I was just a forgiving person. This is the first time he was found guilty. That was about 1.5 years after I had my second surgery. And have you put up the eye for the eye yet? Okay, the eye for the eye is something that I'm so into. You know why? It's very simple. An eye for an eye, you know, the tooth for the tooth, like on and on and on. If it was an eye for an eye in this world, we would all be blind. Everyone, even the pastors, God bless you, but even the pastors would be with us. We're all imperfect. We all make mistakes, and we're all there, and it wouldn't work. It doesn't work. It hasn't worked, and it will never work. An eye for an eye. Okay? I carry this in my wallet. It says, please be advised that I have signed the Declaration of Life. Therefore, I hereby declare that should I die as a result of a violent crime, I request that the person or persons found guilty for my killing not be subject or put in jeopardy of the death penalty under any circumstances, no matter how heinous the crime or how much I have suffered. This is in my wallet. So I'm not just saying the words, I mean the words. And as I heard in the unity prayer, the words peace, community, and creativity. We are community. Out there is community. Creativity, wearing a t-shirt to the grocery store. Wearing a button when you go play pool. Be challenging. Don't be afraid to wear it. Show it how you believe. It really makes a difference. Because there's some people, when I'm going to the grocery store, they kind of look at me kind of like this, so they pretend they're not looking at it. But they're looking at it. They're looking at it, and they're like, interesting. This is gonna go. But you like they were saying is that don't wait until something happens to you to be involved. Because no matter if we have the story or not, I look at the world as a pie. You know how many issues we have and how many slices of issues we have here? We all need to know both sides to know where we're really at and what we believe. Right?
Absolutely.
Right. So my father, yeah, that's my lawyer. That's my lawyer. And she's also a minister too. She's a double double whammy. She doesn't waste time, let me tell you, Melody. So she taught me a lot of things and helped me through that, like I never would be. Oh, by the way, these two, I found out later that that was the judge's parents because it was his first trial and they had to be there for his first trial to watch him do his first trial. But I remember earlier in the week, we were all sitting downstairs in the courtroom for lunch and they came by and they kept touching me and smiling at me and I'm thinking, interesting, why are they so nice to me? And so, you know, so it was kind of an interesting experience. Another thing I will tell you is that after he was found guilty, his two aunts and his best friend were there for that and when he had the first death penalty. After that, there was nobody there for him. It was me, my family, and my church that stood behind him that whole time. And that says something. One other thing I wanted to share with you is my grandmother, my dad's mother. My grandmother taught my dad about the death penalty. Dad taught me about the death penalty. And when we went up, when you saw one of the pictures of where the first trial where he was found guilty, we were allowed to get up before the jurors gave their recommendation to speak. My grandmother got up first and said, okay, Judge, I'm against the death penalty, but do what you gotta do. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, did I just hear what I heard? And then it took me back to all the places that we went around the world to speak. And I came home and I would be excited to tell my grandmother of where we were and who we met and who taught us something. And she would never say anything. She just nodded her head, and I always wondered why. And that taught me it right there that people change your mind, it could be one way or the other. But we all have to remember that, yes, my dad had a mother and father, but the people on death row have mother and fathers too. It's funny how we feel bad for children that are abused, but now we don't feel sorry for them when they're on death row. Where does it go from there? My father's favorite hymn, as I've said before, is "Let There Be Peace on Earth, and let it begin with me." But I say, let it begin with each and every one of us who's a part of this. Be a part of it. Join something, join a group, join DPA to know about executions. Find out more, have a debate, do all these things that you need to know more about the death penalty. Thank you very much for listening to us, and thank you for letting me be here, us be here.
Thank you. And now we're going to take questions and hear from the folks here in our audience. And but before we do, I just want to know, it's kind of hard to see up here, just in terms of reading it, but the common thread that we see across most people that end up on death row is abuse and neglect and addiction at childhood. Severe child abuse, suffering severe child abuse, being born of an addict or an alcoholic, as is the case in Taberon Honor's case, right? Suffering abuse, witnessing abuse, physical, sexual, etc. The person that's going to be executed in Florida, for example, on August 29th, last month, Governor DeSantis in Florida signed a compensation package for people that suffered abuse at the Dozier Home for Boys, or whatever it's called there in Florida, but it's for foster kids and whatever to be placed. And apparently it was a very, very abusive space, such that Governor DeSantis signed a bill granting compensation for people who suffered that. And then a few weeks later, he signed a death warrant for one of those children, who's now, of course, he committed the murder and he's on death row and he's going to be executed, and he's suffering from that abuse and that neglect. And this is the common thread that we see in almost everybody that ends up being executed, is what happened to them as children. Doesn't excuse what they did, but it helps us understand. So with that, we have a special guest here, and I want to invite anybody who would like to offer feedback, comments, ask us questions, share different perspectives. To do so, Michelle is going to come with a microphone. If you are willing to be on our live stream of this event, then that's great. You can come up and stand here. If not, as long as you use the microphone, we'll be able to hear you. But first, let me welcome and introduce to you from the NAACP and a candidate for District 26, Janetta Williams.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I am Janetta Williams. Up until about 2 weeks ago, president for the NAACP, but because I'm running as a candidate for House District 26, I had to resign until either I win or lose, then I'll be reinstated. I've been in opposition of the death penalty for many years. In fact, in 1992, I was very outspoken against the death penalty of William Andrews. You know, we had visuals, we had opposition, we had letters to the board partners. You know, we had all of these different things, and we had even statements showing the things that were being said that William Andrews did that he did not do. But yet they ended up until the very last night, and we were at the visual in front of the governor's mansion, and we thought that we had a reprieve, and then just at the last minute, they said it was a paper jam, that they were trying to get some facts sent over. So went to the Supreme Court, and of course we lost that. And so July 1992, he was executed. But, you know, we worked with the Amnesty International, we worked with Coalition to Abolish the Death Penalty, a lot of other people across the country. But one of the things I think what we should do before Wednesday is start making calls tomorrow to the governor's office. And start making calls to the governor's office, 801-538-1000, and just say that you're in opposition of the death penalty. And if the governor is saying that let's do things the Utah way, but we're saying don't kill in the name of, don't kill, execute someone in my name. You know, I'm a citizen of the state, I'm paying taxes here, and be forceful and just tell the governor's office that you are in opposition of the death penalty, and leave your name and telephone numbers is what they usually ask for. But it's still not too late to still at least make your voices be heard. So we want to, you know, encourage people to do that. And as we continue to work against the death penalty and abolishing it. And like I said, several years ago, we had someone here, 2 years, saying that, you know, they had a bill run, and, you know, we thought, okay, this will be the year, and it didn't go through. So we want to make sure that we continue to fight that. And if I am elected to the House of Representatives, one of the first things that I want to do is to bring that bill up again, and to say no more in Utah. You know, we can't continue to let this go. And we have to have people there that fight. And I've been able to work on both sides. And I want to make sure that we can get this done and just keep saying that no more executions in our name. And be sure to make those calls to the governor's office and say 801-538-1000. That you oppose the death penalty, and want to make sure that he's listening. You know, they listen to all these other things across the country, and they listen to other things and saying that let's do things the Utah way. Well, we're saying that they want the Olympics back here in 10 more years. We want to say the other countries want to come to a state where we want to say that execution is okay. I don't think so. At least I would want to. So again, thank you for being here today, and keep up the good work to make sure that we address the death penalty.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing with that. So, other comments, dialogue, questions? Yes.
I just have a question for Randy. I remember when you were up at the legislature and you had a couple of legislators who were really surprisingly kind of on your side and looking into it, partly because of the expense of the death penalty, and partly because, you know, why do we want to be like China and Iran and other countries that execute people? To what do you attribute the turnabout? That it seemed to be so close, and then what did you attribute that to?
Ready, come back up.
Yeah, I think a couple of years we had it going on up there in a row. I know there hasn't been nothing recently. You know, I do expect something coming up in the future, but I just think we had some legislators up there that had a lot of power. And, you know, they sponsored a bill pretty tough in Utah. You know, and I think they had a lot of power. I think they did honestly call in some favors. I think the bill was tabled in the very last of it, because I think they were scared that it was going to pass. And I was there at a lot of the hearings and legislative session. Actually, that's when I got some pictures made up and started showing them some pictures of my brother's body. It's like, you know, I was very angry that they tabled the bill, but all in all, I just think we just have to keep approaching them up here at the Capitol, you know, being proactive about this death penalty and get rid of it. That answers your question.
Any other questions?
Hey, my name is Kathleen, and I just wanted to say, and I told this to Abe, I'm really sorry that we had to meet you. I'd really rather that we didn't have to, but I'm glad you're here for us. There are a lot of us here that want to keep this going. We're trying to get together to figure out how to write the inmates that are on death row. So if anybody's got any ideas or suggestions, I'm with my Carla. She's got some ideas, so if we could get together doing that and then like maybe start talking to some of our state representatives and legislators and just kind of keep this going. Just, what are we gonna do, drop this? And then there's gonna be another execution date, and then we get together and get angry. I'm not gonna say angry and who's work.
Does anybody know what the Mormon Church's stance is on this? Because they're the people running our state.
Yeah, she asked what the Mormon Church's stance on that is on the death penalty. You know, back when my brother got convicted almost 4 years ago now, they were active against it. They believe in blood atonement, bunch of stuff. You know, my brother made a statement actually about blood atonement. They kind of went with it and ran. I think the LDS Church right now is neutral on it. You know, I think what we're waiting for is for them to have a revelation from God to change it. They did it with black people coming to the priesthood years ago. And you know what, I think with the Catholic Church and the Pope and all the, you know, the pressures being built. And we know the Mormon Church made a statement to their members, we wouldn't have the death penalty here in Utah. You know, and I'm LDS. Non-active, but I may use that down the road for something good. Yeah, they're neutral right now.
I will add to that, so in 2010, we built a group called Utahns for Alternatives to Death Penalty, and that has sort of fizzled out, as happens in other states too, where executions go dormant. The folks that were doing that sort of get busy or die or move away or whatever it is. So we're looking to recreate something here, and not just about included in that, of course, will be death row ministry and support of the people on death row, but also, you know, a lot of folks want to know what else they can do, and in particular, communities of faith, when you hear about a murder, you can start showing up for the family on both sides, the family of the killer or the accused, but also the families of the victim, because they too, you find out really quick when you get into such a traumatic situation who your real friends are and who's going to keep showing up for you beyond that first moment. And that's really what's important, is what, who's there a year or two from now? Who's there when suddenly it's in the news again and it's like that scab has been ripped off the wounds of the families on both sides, and who's paying attention to their pain? You know, our board chair, Reverend Sharon Risher, the chair of the Board of Death Penalty Action, is also very active in Moms Demand Action, because her mother and two cousins were among the 9 people killed in the Charleston church shooting at Mother Emanuel AME Church in 2015 in Charleston, South Carolina. The killer of her mother and 2 cousins and 6 other people and others who were wounded is on federal death row, a white supremacist. And right now, the Department of Justice is calling and saying, what do you think about this case? Because he's applied for clemency. President Biden has been in office, and that's what presidents do on their way out. They grant some clemencies on the way out. So of course, anybody who wants to do that. The point is though, when they call Sharon and say, what do you think? She has to relive the day she got that phone call. And that's what happens when we send somebody to death. We send their family to death row, but we also sentence the family, the victim, to death row. And we tell them, wait until we kill the guy and then you'll feel better. In other words, asking them to put their healing process on hold. And then they get to see what's going to happen after the execution, which may or may not happen. You know, we're pretty sure this one here in Utah is going to happen. However, miracles do happen. But often in other states, the appeals would run up to the last minute. And sometimes the victim's family are even there ready to witness the execution, and then rug gets pulled out from under them again. And how does that conducive to healing? No amount of killing is going to bring back our loved ones. There's always going to be that empty chair at the table when the family gathers. So what if we begin able to move forward instead of being stuck waiting for that so-called justice? And by the way, the other piece of this victim experience is in the vast majority of cases where there's a murder and they're death eligible, they don't even seek a death sentence. When they do seek a death sentence, they don't always get it. When they do get a death sentence, it doesn't always stick. It gets overturned during the appeals process because of some unfairness or unscrupulous behavior. And but of the people that end up staying on death row to the point of execution, you know, that's fewer than 2% of the cases where the death penalty is possible. So if the death penalty is for the victim families, then the question we have to ask is, well, what does that say to all the other victim family members where there is no death sentence? Your loved one wasn't valuable enough? The truth is that when there's not a death sentence, it's actually a blessing in disguise for such people because they can begin a healing process. And in Utah and almost, and I think every other place in this country, if you're facing the death penalty, if you've got a capital charge, you're either going to get death by execution or death by incarceration. That's really what life without parole is. It's no life to be in prison. Just think about that the next time you get a hankering for a pizza or whatever your favorite food is. You can go out and get it or call DoorDash and have it delivered. When's the last time you made love to your partner or walked barefoot on grass? That doesn't exist for people that are doing death by incarceration. So it's no pain. Other questions, comments? Yes? Hold on, wait for the microphone, please.
Dennis has.
Oh, we got one here, then we'll come to you. Go ahead.
Have a comment. Okay, there's a man by the name of Brian Stevenson who runs the project Innocence Project, it's called, in Alabama. He takes on cases of people where the evidence tends to indicate that the person might be innocent, and then kind of reinvestigates and often relitigates those cases with the aim of getting them released. He wrote a book called Just Mercy. It's a tough one. In the back of the book, he lists every person at the time of publication of that book. Every person who was on death row in each state in the United States. The book's called Just Mercy. And he quotes a study that indicates that we execute possibly as many as 13% of innocent people. How can you possibly support a policy that results in, I mean, pick 4 people in this room that you would execute. Innocent people being executed, and we still practice that policy. It's barbaric.
And also what they've done is they found people who were innocent after they were executed, which is a little too late.
Yeah.
So this is my first time actually like considering this conversation, and thinking about it. And I'm not sure where to sit on this topic. My first question would be, what does this sign up here say? What does it mean by no profiting from executions? If someone can kind of give me some factual evidence on that. And then, you know, I'm not sure where I sit on this topic because, well, I mean, my dad had a very, very good friend that was murdered, and that is so a cold case. They never were able to find the person that murdered him. And I just, I guess, like the people that, well, one, I guess another question I have is what happened in Utah recently that brought the death penalty back into the conversation as far as like the execution that's gonna happen on Wednesday? And then like, what are you, maybe this is just a out there question, but what do you see like, I mean, because I have a hard time with not the concept of forgiveness, but the concept that there was a heinous crime, you know, committed, and you're giving a free pass to that person and saying, that's okay, we'll let you go. Or, you know, or that's okay, you can go live your life, like, you know, because I feel like every choice that we make has consequences, and I'm hearing the innocence arguments, and I'm hearing how it's affecting families, and I'm still not sure where I sit on this topic, but I just, I mean, have you seen a lot of cases for those of you? And my dad and my sister both spent years working in the prisons, as electricians and for the probation department and like nurses behind bars. So I feel like, you know, in our home, there was a very interesting conversation, an interesting dynamic. And yeah, I guess, have you seen a lot of restorations from people that, let's say, were on death row and then got life sentences, and did they turn around and become different people? You know, so yeah, those are some of my thoughts on the feeling.
Thank you very much for coming and for sharing that. This is what we want, is to have this dialogue with these kinds of questions and be among people that aren't sure where they stand. So I'm going to try to make sure I remember all of the things that you asked, because they're all worthy concerns and questions. And first, as I just said a few minutes ago, there is no picnic in prison, and nobody is saying let them off the death row. Nobody is saying free murderers. The only people we want to free are people who are wrongly convicted. Okay, we want to free people who are wrongly convicted. Nobody is making the claim that Taberon Honor doesn't deserve to spend the rest of his life in prison. He said he deserves to spend the rest of his life in prison. And again, it's not life in prison, it's death by incarceration. It's a severe punishment, and we can be saved from people who've done those things by that. One of your questions was about profiting from executions. So the state just admitted a week or two ago that they spent $200,000 to procure pentobarbital, the drug that will be used to execute Taberon Honor on Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Now, I have euthanized 2 dogs at the end of their lives. I did them a favor using pentobarbital, including cremation, both of them less than $400. So can't imagine it takes much more of that drug to take care of a person, right? So why are we spending that much money? And the reason is because somebody's making a profit off of it. The state is willing to spend it, and what we know from recent reporting by National Public Radio in Texas, which found and exposed the compounding pharmacist who is making the drugs that they're using, or was making the drugs that they're using in Texas, is he said that they would come, corrections officers, in their personal vehicles Because I don't want anybody to know where the drugs are coming from. And they would tell him, you could be charged a lot more for this. And he said this in the news story, that, he wasn't interested in making a huge profit, but he could have, and somebody is profiting off of this execution. We're gonna spend easily at least $500,000 on the circus of this execution this week. Easily, not just on the drugs that they bought, but also on all the overtime of the corrections officials, all the overtime of people in the legal department, both, by the way, we're paying for both the defense and the prosecution side. All the extra security that we're gonna see out of the prison, which is kind of ridiculous, because the people that are going to the prison are all peaceful, loving people who are gonna be praying for forgiveness and healing, and not coming with any kind of nefarious intent. But still, if it's anything like it is in all the other prisons around the country, they're gonna have extra law enforcement, extra guards, extra state police, extra local, extra sheriffs, etc., all paying attention to who we are and probably investigating who each and every one of us is, because we're outsiders and coming, all of that. So, and that's happened to us in the past. So,
I speak to the, one of your other questions.
stand up in here.
Oh, sorry. One of your other questions was, kind of related to why would you allow that person to live when it would have been such a heinous crime, right?
Yeah, like in the instance of I'm sorry, SueZann.
SueZann.
Is that your name? Yeah, I can't imagine being a witness to all that and getting forgiveness.
I would say as a woman of faith, I don't believe we should give someone a time limit to find God. Now, unfortunately, Taberon Honor, he's got a time limit. And I don't know if he's allowing people to come see him. I don't know if he's going to be able to have a good relationship with God before he meets him. But I, as a Catholic person, I believe it should not be on someone else's schedule when you are able to reconcile with God. Please let him do it in his own time. And if it's life in prison, you give him that opportunity to do it in his own time. We are not. That's how I would answer it. Does anybody else have any comments? What is your name?
My name is Rochelle.
Rochelle, does anybody have any other comments?
Charles does, and I also want to add one more piece to one thing you asked about. Is there space for redemption, and can people be redeemed and be free? And we are not advocating for freeing Taberon Honor. We're not advocating for freeing everybody on death row. However, in 1972, when the U.S. Supreme Court struck down all the death penalty laws in the country, which forced any state that wanted to have a death penalty to write new laws, many of which did, including Utah. But that took about 600 people off of death rows across the country because they struck down the death penalty. All their sentences were changed to whatever the next highest punishment, which at that time was life in prison. But life without parole didn't exist probably. But what they would do is, you get 5 life terms or, life plus 100 years, whatever it is. But Rudy Alexander was on death row in Georgia for a crime he committed as a 17-year-old. His sentence was changed. He got parole, he pulled himself up. And he retired, not sure exactly how long ago now, but he retired as a fully tenured professor of criminology at Ohio State University. Okay, he was able to redeem himself and become a productive citizen. And that's not true in every case, but it's true in many. And remember, the vast majority of people who commit murder don't get a death sentence. And many people who commit murder, not all murders are punishable by death, right? Many people who commit terrible crimes end up coming back out and living as productive citizens. Charles, Keith wanted to answer some of what you asked about as well.
Yes, I've been asked that question several times, and I did my research, and my answer was, when Jesus was being executed, he said, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." And while he was being murdered, he forgave a murderer in conversation. He told him, "This day you shall be in paradise. And I stood with that, and I stood by that, and that's been one of my answers. So, you know, some of these things we have questions for the Lord. We have questions for Jesus. See, we have questions, and that's what prayer is all about. Asking those questions in prayer, as I did, and I got my answers, and he took me right where I needed to find those answers, because I needed him so bad to guide me. And I knew there was going to be times when I had to answer some of these questions, but that was it. Jesus forgave them as they were murdering him, and yet he told a murderer, this day you shall be in paradise.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Thank you for talking. I'm on the fence. I'm asking questions.
Can you hold your microphone right?
Thank you for being here. I'm really interested in this topic. I'd like to know from the people that spoke what they think about the government's ability to take a life and say because of just war.
The government's ability to take a life.
Is there such a thing as a just war? Or is it, because we're talking about government's capital punishment. I just want to know what you feel on that topic. Is there such thing as a just war? Can the government go?
Oh, just war.
Can the government go and fight? And
Oh, sure.
or is that something you stand against? I just want to know where the speakers stand.
Sure. So the question is about what do you feel about a just war? And I would presume also about the ability of government officials to take on. Well, if there's somebody comes in here and starts shooting, as happens so often in this country, I'll do whatever it takes to stop them, including killing them. And I've already steeled myself in my mind that if I find myself in a mass shooter situation, I'm going at the shooter. Because somebody has to. And, you know, and the point is that we don't take issue. Obviously, we would hope that law enforcement and the military aren't killing people who are defenseless and will give it up. But if the enemy is shooting at you, or a criminal is shooting at you, and you shoot back at them and they get killed, okay. Sorry it happened, but that's part of the responsibility of government. But when a police officer captures somebody and apprehends them and puts them in handcuffs, or when we capture the enemy in war and disarm them, it is our obligation according to the laws of war to see that no further harm comes to them and to take care of them. Okay, and that's what we're asking people to do now. State officials, state employees are being asked to take on the burden of taking a person who can no longer hurt anybody, removing them from their cell and killing them. And I can tell you, if you hear from any number of former corrections officers who have joined, and corrections officials and executives and corrections officers who have actually carried out executions and then joined our movement, it traumatizes them to have to take on that burden.
I appreciate that. Thank you. But I just have a quick answer by.
Yes. Anybody want to add to that?
I think the taking of anyone's life is wrong, but sometimes it has to be necessary to protect others. You know, you're not going to just stand there and let someone hurt your loved ones. And see, this is where you have to seek forgiveness for what you've done. You know, you may have taken a life, regardless of the reason. You have to get God to forgive you. You know, man is very tough on forgiving. We're going to give a zillion and one reasons, but God says that he is a forgiving God. So if there's something like that that you have to do, then, you know, you have to take that up with him and not necessarily man. Because there's going to be some that's going to stand with you, and there's going to be others to stand against you. But God is the main one that you have to convince that of and wait for that forgiveness and those blessings for your life to go forward. Our country, you have to think about that. Our country was built off bloodshed. Our country was built in such a crazy way. We're all here. And we've seen what death and destruction did to our country. You know, America, slaves, murder, civil war, until here we are today. So you'd have to go back and ask yourselves, were any of these wars necessary? Was it absolutely necessary to kill so many people when all we had to do was make a simple decision?
Randy or SueZann?
You reminded me of two things. That there have been people on death row that were veterans. And what does that tell us? They were taught to kill, but when they come back, they're not supposed to kill. And I think you all know where that is going with that one. Okay. Number two, what you reminded me of is when I was watching my dad get stabbed to death, I didn't feel like a PK anymore, and I didn't feel like he was a minister. He was my dad. And I think that if there was a gun on the table, I would have taken it up and I would have tried to shoot him. I was a normal human being after, without when this was happening. I mean, I thought later going, okay, I wish I knew how to shoot, and I would just shoot his arm and not kill him. It just doesn't work that way. But I was a daughter. I can admit it now, I could have killed him, but I just don't know, I didn't have a chance at that point.
So my question is, would you have liked to do it, or would you think you were involved?
That's the whole point, is that, and my point is that I was a normal human being, and I could have done it and would have done it, maybe. I don't know, because it never happened. That's why it's hard for me to answer that. But I know that if that gun was there, I bet you anything I would have picked it up. Something would have happened. Could have happened.
I'm trying to get to an understanding, right? Is that it? Because I have a follow-on question about, so what I'm hearing is, I like your answer about, there's a place for killing, and it's in defense, right? It's in defense.
Defense, that's true.
And I wanted to know if everybody on the panel that talked believes that, and I kind of got a really clear answer from this gentleman who just spoke.
Where do you believe that it's good to kill? Or do you believe that at some point it's good to kill?
So this is my question, because I'm trying to, in order to understand why you're opposing the death penalty, I'm trying to get to the root of it. And I think what I suspect is you're saying that killing human life is wrong no matter what. It's wrong, absolutely wrong. You say absolutely wrong?
Absolutely.
Okay, so my follow-on question, didn't hear from the other gentleman, but is just so I can understand, like, is this a consistent argument? Where do you stand on the woman's right to choose or to terminate a pregnancy?
Well, I mean, I'm not gonna really.
But see, this is without consistency.
Well, let me tell you, this is how I feel. That is a subject for the women. Totally for the women. I cannot answer that because I would not be going through those things.
I appreciate this, but if there's not consistency here, I have a hard time finding.
Well, let me give you this one.
Okay.
Let me give you this one. To let you know how thirst of death and life really is. When Jesus rose Lazarus, that man was laying dead in a state, he could have left him there. He brought him back to show us the power of life. Even though we sometimes have to take a life, that's where forgiveness comes in. It's hard to go through life and have never done anything to be forgiven for. There's so many different degrees of forgiveness. But when I read that he rose Lazarus in those 3 days, that showed me that life was very necessary, very necessary. But again, they turned right around and killed Jesus. See, so it's showing us off and on who we are. Because I will make that vow, I will not take up a gun for any reason. I've gone through the death penalty. I've seen what it's done to my family. I've seen what the gun has done to so many other people. I cannot take up the gun. And that's just my personal opinion. I can't speak for anyone else, but I'd rather be shot than shoot.
I do believe that the issue that we're talking about today is, it's really about the death penalty. And I know where you're coming from, Daniel. I know where you're trying to go. And I get that. This particular argument today, or this discussion today, is really, it's focused on those individuals who are really in this situation, who are going to lose their lives at our hands. And if you choose for yourself that particular issue of the unborn is wrong for you, and that is your choice, what you're talking about, right? This particular issue is people who are incarcerated, who are sitting there and are going to be killed by us. Yes, sir.
First, I agree with you that life is life. That you can't, I don't think you can limit it to just people on the The other thing is, I've worked with a couple of legislators in the past. I think one of the only way you're going to stop executions is to get legislation passed that stops it. You know, I mean, I appreciate the emotional responses of a lot of people in this room, and that's important. But, you know, it doesn't mean anything in the long run if people don't get together and get up there and say, we need this bill passed. I think one of the problems is that you know, right now in Utah law, there isn't really total, if you say the alternative is incarceration without parole. There isn't really incarceration without parole. Because under Utah law, the Pardon Parole Board, first of all, they can commute a sentence, a life or a death sentence. They can commute it to life without parole. Even if the person is on life without parole, there's a section of the statute that says that they can release a person if they have if they find clear and convincing evidence that the person is incapable of doing it again, or incapable of being a danger to society. I think one of the problems is that exception, because a lot of legislatures frankly don't trust the justice system to administer that. I mean, we see what's happening with in the federal system in particular, but you have people that are released after committing pretty serious crimes. And a lot of legislators simply don't trust the judicial system to administer that law correctly. And so I think if you're going to really pass a law that stops executions, you're going to have to say, if a person is given life without parole, there's no exceptions. There's no pardon board that can reduce their sentence. There's no way out of it. If that happens, I think you've got a decent chance to get the bill passed. But people don't, legislators and people generally, a lot of people simply don't trust the judicial system to carry it out.
That's kind of exactly right. And we don't trust, I mean, on this, we want to say this is a pro-life. You know, if you're pro-life on one situation, you know, then you have abortion, and people, I think we got a different set of rules here for that. I'm pro-life, but I'm not a woman. Just like Charles said, I don't know what I would do in that situation. I don't believe in killing fetuses, but I can't judge that as myself. I think we need people like Juanita Williams and people there that understands the legal, you know, she's been in NAACP for a long time here in Utah. She's done some where's District 26?
26.
What area is that?
Sorry, West Valley and part of Maine.
Oh, good. It's good. I think we need people more like her that's going to step up. And people are it's hard in Utah I mean, in Utah, they're pro-life until it comes to the death penalty. You know, we're a red state. But when it comes to death penalty, they're not pro-life, you know. And to me, it's kind of a hypocritical thing. And I'm pro-life, but I'm not a woman that has to make that decision. So I personally not allowed guns, and I feel very blessed. I'm actually a convicted felon. It don't bother me not to have a weapon. I don't want to kill nobody. I don't know if somebody was killing me, if I can defend myself, because I've become such passive over the last 14 years dealing with the death that I've had to do too, the destruction and the pain that it's caused me and my family. So I never want to be put in that position. I don't know what I do. I mean, I've been in many situations. You know, see, what if someone was raping your daughter? You know, people, it's like, I don't know. I honestly can say I wouldn't want that person to get the death penalty now. And my kids know that.
But you'd probably kill him yourself if you had to.
Yes. If I was there, witness it, I would probably instinctively defend my kids. But it's a hard question. You never know until you're in the situation. If you haven't walked in someone else's shoes, it's hard to kind of judge what they're going through.
Yeah. As Bob Mike said, we get to unite based on that which we have in common. And I can guarantee you that there are people with diversity of opinions on all manner of things. But today we're here about judicial executions. So I want to appreciate exactly what you said. You're exactly right. Justice Scalia said, those who come and protest at the Supreme Court are barking up the wrong tree. You got to go across the street and change the law. And that is ultimately what we need to do. I want to share with you that I was the field manager in New Jersey when New Jersey became the first state to abolish the death penalty legislatively in the current era. We did that in 2007. My state legislator, when she voted as a Republican to abolish the death penalty, she wrote to each of her constituents who had written to her. So I got one of these letters, and she said, I chose how I was going to vote based on what I heard from my constituents. I received over 200 letters. Now, this is a person who represented 70,000 plus people in her district. She received 200 letters, and only 10 of those asked her to retain the death penalty. And I say that to you because it doesn't take changing everybody's minds. We just have to find the people who agree with us and get them to do something. And sometimes that sounds like preaching to the choir, but sometimes the choir ain't singing loud enough, and sometimes the choir ain't singing the right song. And that's why you see the message, the different kinds of messages. We're looking to try to find the thing that resonates with you. Sir, I find myself to be anti-abortion but pro-choice. I also found myself as a Jew recognizing the teaching of my faith, which doesn't recognize a person as a person until they are born and can live independently of the mother. So that's the teaching of my faith, and I resent it when people tell me that my faith is wrong. And I think everybody can understand that. We are a country that is supposed to have a separation between church, from church and state, between separating church from state, and we're asking people to look at public policy. We're also asking people, do we need to execute Taberon Honor in order to be safe from him or hold him accountable? I think anybody that actually takes a careful look at this would understand that no, we don't need execution to be safe from people who've done awful things or to hold them accountable. So what do we do? The next couple of days, it's about lifting up the visibility of this issue, which is why we're here, and which is why we're inviting each of you, if you will, take whichever sign speaks to you, take it, stick it somewhere, ideally in a place that's safe and won't get thrown away or blown away. But take a sign. If you're willing to wear a button or a t-shirt, we have them for you at no charge. If you'd like to make a donation that helps us keep giving them away to more people down the road, you're welcome to do so. Please. Over on the water fountain back there, in the window up there, and by the back door over here is one of these, which is a scan code. And if you don't do scan codes, you can just punch in deathpenaltyaction.org and then find the petition for Taberon Honor, and I invite you to sign the other petitions that are there as well. But find the petition for Taberon Honor and sign that, and then share that. Get it out. If you opt into our email list today, you'll get an email tomorrow morning saying, here's the next steps and here's what we're going to be doing next in the next couple of days. Because it's on us to create visibility. The newspaper was here and still is here, and there's 3 television cameras here, and I'm sure they want to talk to you, sir, but they also want to talk to our spokespeople, and we want to make sure so they can get out and go make the news that as soon as we break, you get the interviews that you all need. So I know you all need stand-ups. And we want to make sure that we all go and find the news coverage and share it so that people can see that there's a different message out there. That's why we're here. Lastly, I'm going to say this. We are grateful to everybody that has helped make this happen. We've spent a pretty penny doing so. And we invite those who would like to keep us going down the road, help us pay for plane tickets to the next place, help us pay to replace the t-shirts, help us cover the cost of our housing and all the other stuff that we do, not just here, but across the country. Every execution, we do stuff like this. And if you would like to help make it happen, we're looking for a game changer that can make it so we don't have to ask for money. So if you know somebody or have yourself millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, you'll take that. You'll also take $5 or $1 or $20 or whatever it is you can spare to help us keep going down the road. I want to let Michelle Beasley have the last word here and set us out. But before that, I just want to again express my own appreciation and say that Charles and Randy and SueZann and I are here through the rest of the week. On Wednesday, there's a press conference at 11 a.m. at the State House. Again, if you opt in, if you get our emails, you'll get the information. And we ask people to look for that and share it. And then Wednesday night, there's supposed to be a public protest, a free speech area out at the prison. So we'll be out there by 10:30. We're looking to encourage people to be out there by 11 at least. And then Saturdays, it's one of these very rare now, middle of the executions in the dark at night. But we'll have a little bit of the program, and if you can't come out, we also have a live stream that we'll do from there. So you can be a part of it along with people from around the world that will be watching and that do our live virtual vigils, which we do at every execution. So come, be seen, wear a shirt, wear a pole sign, take the stuff if you will use it. If you have a group in the next couple of days, a place where we can come and talk to people live and share this message briefly, we can do it. We'll do a whole program. Come see me or Michelle and we'll connect. And more important, when school gets going, in the coming months, we want to make sure that we do more programs like this here too. This is about building the community of love that wants to end death penalty in this state. And if you're a part of that, make sure you're connected so that we can talk about what's next. Thank you, Michelle Beasley.
Yeah, I was gonna mention to you, I know that there are, I would love to have these guys come back and speak at schools. I was telling them that when I was in 7th grade, I remember a movie that they showed me about this murderer. And it was back at St. Vincent's. I went to school at St. Vincent's. And in 7th grade, they showed us this movie about this murderer. And at the very end of the movie, you find out, it's just his dialogue. At the end of the movie, you find out he's the executioner. It stuck with me. If we can talk to kids in junior high, they're old enough to figure this stuff out and to understand it and to start asking their own questions. So we just don't, like Abe said, we had a week to put this together. And praise God, we have been given what we've been able to do in such a very short period of time. But that's why you've been seeing emails from me, right? Please join us if this strikes your heart. Speak to one of us. Thank you so much, you guys, for coming. And I hope you will come back again and let's keep this going. God bless everyone. Thank you.